Welcome, everybody. My name is Mina Jane. I'm the director of the Ashland Public Library in Massachusetts, which is in the United States because Peter Bellerby, our guest today, is in the UK. So I had to make that distinction. So we are very, very pleased to have him here. He's talking about his latest book, The Globemakers. And as you can see from behind him, he's a true globe maker. So we'll get more into his story in just a minute. Just want to say a couple things. One is, I'd like to thank the Friends of the Ashland Public Library, which supports all of our programming. I'd also like to thank Peter, for letting us share this program with other local libraries. 25 signed on. And, I think that when libraries work together, we just make magic. So this is going to be a magical program just for you. You can buy signed books by Peter at Aesop's Fable. I will put a link to that in the chat. And, you can also get them from your local library because, again, libraries, magic, all that. So if you have a question for Peter, please put it in the Q&A, which is a button at the bottom of your screen. If you just want to chat with each other amongst yourselves, do that in the chat. And I will moderate all of those questions. Oh, chat shouldn't be disabled. Oh, no. Hold on one second. Okay, now chat should be enabled. So please somebody try that and we'll see if it's working. Perfect. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. All right. So Peter is the founder and creator of Bellerby Globemakers in the UK. And it is the only truly bespoke maker of globes in the world that we know of. And I would love to know, Peter, first of all, thank you for being here. Second of all, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then I'll get right into questions.
Thank you very much for inviting me. So my name is Peter, and I set up this company 15 years ago, just as a result of trying to find my father a decent decent present for his 80th birthday. And so I set about trying to look for a globe, and I couldn't find one. And it was 2008, and the financial crisis had just started, and I'd been doing a bit of property developing, and that was definitely a bad time to continue that. So I thought I had a few months spare. I thought I'd perhaps make him a globe, and I thought it'd be quite fun to do it. And 2 years later, and all my savings gone, I managed to produce that globe. Working in spheres is very, very challenging. So, but it obviously, as I started the journey, I realized I had to set a company up because my expenditure was crazy. And in the end, I think actually making the globe was probably the easiest thing. I had to learn everything else about running a company. I had to learn the marketing and PR of a company. I had to learn to enjoy smiling when photographers wanted to take shots of me. I had to learn about markups in stores. I still don't even understand that because we barely do it. So there's so many things I didn't know going in, that the actual construction and making the globe itself was possibly one of the easier challenges. But anyway, fire ahead. I'll leave you to question.
Okay, so as I said to everybody, this is primarily a Q&A. We'll show some images at some point, but like I said, put your questions in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, and I will moderate them to Peter. But for that, I really wonder, some people wouldn't be able to find a globe and they'd say, I'll just find something else. What made you want to make a globe?
I'd always been fascinated, I guess, with globes. I remember getting my first laptop. In fact, I would say this, my first laptop. It was actually my girlfriend's at the time first laptop. And I remember drawing in Microsoft Paint the world in freehand and making her a screensaver. And I've kind of always just been fascinated with them. And obviously, when I thought about the idea of making my dad one, I was potentially thinking about making one for myself as well. So it kind of, I was killing two birds with one stone in a sense. So, but equally, we've all struggled buying our father's presents for birthdays. I've honestly I bought him probably 20 years ago some cigars. he doesn't smoke. He definitely doesn't smoke cigars. So why I was just like, so I just felt embarrassed, and I felt I would make up for 20, 30, 40 years of slightly boring, slightly useless presence.
We've all been there. So, but again, were you a crafter before? What is your background that had you crafting it and then creating a company?
Yeah, so I've got a lot of experience in kind of making things, or um, I guess my mother would probably say I took every single toy apart in my childhood, and then I would put them back together, and I'd be very clever and save several of the parts on the side that I didn't need in the recreation of it. And we kind of lived in the country, so um, you're quite self-sufficient. So we had quite a big lawns, and we had, believe it or not, 4 lawnmowers. So I had to understand how they all worked. We actually had a grass tennis court, and we had a lawnmower that went with a roller that went about 10 miles an hour. So I used to run behind it. So I understand how to make things, or at least I felt I was up to that challenge. And I'm relatively artistic. I like painting. It's something I'm keen on, and I think I've got a good aesthetic eye. So that led me to think that I could do it, but nothing made me prepared for the issues with doing anything on a sphere. Just for instance, the simplest issue, we use watercolors. So when you paint in watercolor, you have a flat surface because it's pigment suspended in water. So as soon as you get to a sphere, it gets very difficult. You potentially have water flowing all around it. So you have to learn a technique to overcome that. And there are just so many things that with a sphere you have to think about that you just wouldn't ordinarily think about in any normal construction.
Wow. I just thought you like slapped some paper onto a globe and started drawing on it or something. So I'm getting tons of questions. I just want to remind people to put your questions in the Q&A so that I don't lose track of them in the chat. It's a little bit harder to keep track of them in the chat. What about making the company? Like when you made that first globe, what really made you think like, okay, this is something I could do as a business, not just as a hobby?
So probably 4 or 5 months into the process, I was already at minus 15, 20,000 pounds. So I was already kind of, there's no way I'm continuing with this unless I think about it as something I could make a company of. But I had no idea. I still, a few years after I'd started the company, I still thought someone was going to come and knock on my door and say, hey, I've been making globes for years. I'm this company here, blah, blah, blah. But no, I just, because I'd struggled to find them, I knew I genuinely felt there must be a market for it. And I was lucky I had coincidences along the way. The head of the scientific department at Christie's auction house in London happened to live on the next door street to one of the shops I had right at the beginning in 2009. And he came in and he kind of said, or at least I had a studio that happened to be a shop, but it was a studio. And he said, you'll have people queuing around down the street to buy your globes. So I had a lot of kind of coincidences and ideas that made me feel this could be a sensible company, and I could sell some globes. So it's and obviously I needed to recoup some of the money that I was spending so rapidly.
And was it a turn for you into globe making? Did you have a different career or a different educational path before that?
I've had probably quite an odd career. I didn't really do a great deal in my 20s. I did random jobs, and then I started working for a television company, ITV, over here when I was 29, and had a wonderful 7 years there, and then left. The television market was kind of slightly imploding, and they marvelously made me redundant. But in this country, that it's something to make you smile. So I ended up getting 5 years and 5 years pay. It really helped me, and that enabled me to kind of move to the next stage of my life. And then I worked. Prior to this, I was running a kind of venue in town for a friend, just to help him out. So I guess I was going to go back into property developing, and I was just waiting it out.
Wow, this sounds like it was like perfect in terms of like really touching your creative side and fulfilling that for you.
Yeah, definitely. And just, you honestly won't believe how many wonderful coincidences there have been in my whole story, that if one or two of them hadn't happened, I wouldn't be here. I mean, the financial crisis, if that had not happened, no chance I'd be here.
Wow.
Because
That's
it wasn't.
People usually say the opposite about the financial crisis.
Quite a good time to set up a company, because particularly if you've got to do 2 years R&D, because you're not going to be making any revenue in those 2 years anyway.
Right.
So.
Okay, so let me start getting to some of the questions from people. I just wanted to get a history of you, Peter. Edward asks, what advice do you have for aspiring globe makers?
I think go for it. A lot of people often ask me, are you worried about competition? And it's, I suppose, no, go for it's not the right answer. Try and do it when you're at college if you can, and try and get the college to underwrite the cost of everything, because it's phenomenally expensive. Doing anything with a sphere is very, very expensive. So you will, at the beginning, I was making spheres and then papering the gauze onto the spheres. You can't reuse that sphere. It just doesn't really work. So I was having to throw them away every single week. And so it just is very expensive. So if you do it, try and do it as part of your studies at college to help you finance it, because it's, and I think this is why perhaps there are not that many globe makers around, because not only is it very, very difficult, you might not everyone will have the skill to be a globe maker. So 1 in 2 of our makers actually become a maker after a year and a half of training. The other 50%, unfortunately, just find it, it's not something that's their skill. So learn whether you can do it first before you sink too much time and money into it.
That is excellent advice. Eva Jane asks, how do you learn how to make a globe? Like not just the sphere, but like the outside of it.
So what we're making, it's defined as a printed globe. So and the interesting thing actually about a globe maker is we are in fact a publisher. So I didn't even realize that at the beginning when I set this up, that we publish globes. So there are so many stages of making a globe. Obviously you're making the sphere, and then you apply the gauze, the surfboard shaped things. I'll get a piece here so you can see like this.
Oh, you know what? I believe I have a picture.
Yeah, you might have an image of that. And then you just, it's just about practice. You just have to do it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, and not be defeated by constant failure. It's quite difficult to do something so many times, and you think you're there, and then you do it, and you've made, like 6 months in, I was making half decent globes, and then the next day I'd come into and do more trials, and I couldn't do it at all. And it's just such a, there are so many variables in the process that you just have to go through the process so many times that you see all these variables and you knock them out of the reckoning when you're making.
I'm going to actually show those pictures so we can talk about like what is happening, and maybe that'll help people understand the work that you do. Let me just, okay. All right.
So,
So can
yeah.
everybody see those? So what is happening here?
So this is Leo, who is applying that surfboard-shaped gore to a sphere. So he is, so you can see the globes upside down in a sense, or the northern hemisphere is facing him, and he's just putting on what looks like Eastern Russia, which is one of the final gores. So it's just he's had to put that gore into water to make it relax, and then it will be stretched and applied to the sphere. And that's he's almost at the end. So this is B, who is she's left now. Actually, she's working for the our king at the moment, doing his furniture, but she is sanding down a base for a Churchill globe. So that's the largest globe we make, which is 127 centimeters, 50 inches rather. And that is the base that it sits on, which weighs about 120 kilograms. That's solid oak with a hole in it.
And is that the globe that's going to go on there, the one that's behind her?
No, that one, that's the beauty about globes, perspective. That's actually in front of her, isn't it? I'm sure it's anyway. No, that's a 65 centimeter globe. So that would double that size would go on that base.
Wow. Okay.
This is Callum and Dom, who are just doing the fitting of the globe and the meridian into the base. So it has a wooden base, and you can see the brass meridian encircling the sphere, the globe. And you can probably see the Callum, who's the one furthest away, at sort of waist level, you can see a kind of black notch in the wooden base. Yeah, just there. And there's also obviously one on this side as well. And the meridian will slip down into that. And then in where the cross, where the two crosses meet, it sits in there, and that supports it. So all these old globes you see as kind of one piece of furniture, they all come apart like this.
Wow.
This Cherry, who is painting. Painting is the longest process. So we currently have 11 painters and kind of 2 people managing them who also paint as well. And if a globe takes 3 days, no, if a globe takes a week to make, it might take a painter 8 weeks to paint it for the Churchill. And for the smaller ones like this, Cherry could take between 2 and 4 days to paint this. So the painting, so it's a printed globe, so all the cartography, all that detail is there from when it's printed. And then the color, we add some ocean color before the gore is applied to the sphere. And then the painters will paint around the coastlines to add contrast between the continents and the oceans. And this is Emma, who is doing the same. I think she's slightly distracted by the photographer there, but it's yeah, she's painting a smaller globe, and there is someone behind Rachel who is varnishing a large globe. So that's the thing with you can imagine with a globe, you when you're painting it or when you're varnishing it, you can't have any of it touching anything. So you can't sit it in, like the little one in the foreground there is sitting on a little base. But when we're varnishing at the end, we have to have an axle going through it and a rig so that you can spin it around and varnish it. Because we do everything by hand, we don't do spray varnishing. So we can varnish it. And that's the one thing I had to we often have to make tooling ourselves to fulfill a job, because there aren't many shops that sell Globemakers equipment.
I can't imagine they would.
Yeah. And this is the kind of step, the one step back, where to begin with, when we could, I suppose, put all the gauze onto the globe without any color on. But if you can imagine then starting to paint the ocean, you would start in the Atlantic, and then one person would have, you'd have to have several people. You have to have one person going up through the Arctic, and then you'd have to have two people coming down and painting, one into the Indian Ocean and one into the Pacific Ocean, and so it would be too complicated. So we paint quite a lot of the color of the oceans prior to the gore going onto the sphere. And we also do flat maps like this. We actually just do regular mapping, but this is one that is the 12 gores that would be on a globe, and people purchase those and frame those.
It's beautiful.
And this is Rachel, who you can see has she's painted pretty much most of this one. She's just finishing off around the Arctic. And this is same Rachel again, who is varnishing. And so we have to put the rig by the window so you can see exactly where your varnish strokes are going.
Those the clothespin things, those are the pieces that you then put on a sphere?
Yeah, they're kind of in the original studio I didn't have much space, so I would have to pin things up. It's kind of more here, a bit of a, just to make the studio a little bit more attractive, I suppose. It's not, we don't on the whole pin things up anymore. It's occasionally we do if it's if we need to, but on the whole, we're very lucky. We have an enormous studio. It's 20 meters squared on 2 levels, so we have plenty of space these days. And this is me. Occasionally I do a bit of making, and this was me making an 80 centimeter globe with Riley opposite me. And then there's another, looks like a 50 centimeter globe in front. And in fact, yesterday I was making, I don't know if you can see behind me, I was making an egg globe we're making an egg globe for charity.
Very cool. I'm going to stop my share and go back to some questions, because that was just amazing. It's astounding what you can do with paper and a round thing.
Well, it's interesting. I was doing a talk last year, and one of the people listening was a paper restorer, and she's been in the industry for decades, and she said to me, "How do you do this? I don't understand how you can possibly do this. I work with paper. I don't know how you do this." And I kind of said, "Well, come and learn for a year and a half, and I'll show you." Yeah.
So let's go into materials. What do you use to make the spheres?
So the spheres are, originally I would make them using plaster of Paris, because I was trying to use, every material I was trying to use was traditional. And then I realized that it just was not the best material to use. So I relatively quickly changed into modern composites. So we use resins and we use GRP, which is fiberglass, the same thing you use for sailing boats hulls.
I would think the plaster of Paris would be really heavy.
Well, that's the thing. The first globe I made was 50 centimeters, and it's quite heavy. You couldn't go higher than that. It would fall apart under its own weight, in a sense. It's not, it's strong, but not that strong. And yeah, it would be super heavy.
Do you have a tool or something that helps you make them perfectly round or egg shaped or whatever shape you're going to make them in?
No, so that's the one thing that we now, I have a separate company who make our spheres for us on the South Coast. It's like a one-man band company, and he does that for us because it's too much to do that in-house. And so, yeah, we have to get all the patterns and the molds made for every single one. And we use, on the Churchill Globe, we used pattern makers who make the patterns for Formula One cars, the monocs on Formula One cars, because you just have to be so accurate in a pattern for a mold, for a sphere, because if there's any discrepancy, it just makes making a globe impossible.
And so then what do you said you use sort of like a webbing of some sort to put on the outside, or is that or do you go directly to paper to put onto the globe?
Yeah, we obviously key the outside of the sphere, and then we go straight to paper. We used to use, on the plaster of Paris, which I might have described in the book, we used to use a webbing on the inside when you're finishing it off to strengthen it. And it does an amazing job. I mean, a bit of webbing on the inside of plaster of Paris quadruples its strength.
And what do you use to create your images of that go onto the globe? Because of course they have to be very precise as well.
In terms of the illustrations. Yeah, so we have an illustrator here who illustrates what our customers want us to add onto a globe. So be it, I don't know whether you can see this one here. This one is a globe we have called an animalia, which has 300 odd animals on it, and our illustrator will illustrate that, and then the cartographers will add that to the cartography, and then it and it'll be a fine line drawing, and then the painters will paint them in using color references. So they're stunningly beautifully done.
Wow. So that's what you mean by bespoke. It's every part of it is unique.
Yeah, and these the stories that go along with the globes represent people's lives. People literally put their life onto a globe, and people talk to us years and years after they've had the globe and say, I go and see my globe every single morning and remind myself about things I've done in my life or things my family have done and the connections I have. It really resonates that way.
So do you make globes just for the corner market, or do they have to be custom designs from not particular, but like people?
Yeah, I mean, probably 80 to 90% are made for customers, but we do make some which we sell through, for instance, in Harrods, they have them. And we have a few places in the States, very kind of bespoke niche places who represent us. But it's something we tighten up. We've tightened that up actually recently, because we have to have the right people to work with. It's not easy working with just general retailers.
Yeah, because then you could just be making the most beautiful thing that's not appreciated.
Well, and the problem is that if people buy a ready-made globe that has no edits on, and then they go home and they look at on our website and they see what the possibilities are, all they want to do is return the first globe and come to us direct, because it doesn't cost them any more. So it's kind of, we obviously would love everyone to know who we are so that they come straight to us. But I recognize that not everyone has the time to do a fully bespoke globe, and sometimes you just want a regular globe. I don't yeah, that's quite a normal thing.
Well, I mean, they're hard to find, just regular globes, as you found.
Well, yeah, a beautiful globe.
Yes. You can get any old globe on Amazon, but it's not the same thing. Riona asks, this is a great question, what's your favorite part of globe making and what is the most difficult?
It's all to do with the goring. So my favorite part when you are goring a globe, putting the paper onto a globe, is putting that last piece on. Because up until then, it's still kind of a sphere with some mapping on. When you put the last piece on, suddenly it becomes a globe. And the most difficult thing is putting the first one on, because if you don't get the first one right, all the rest will go haywire. So you've got to, you put the first one on and then you measure and you remeasure and you remeasure and you check that it's right. And if it's not right, you take it off and you start again.
Mhm.
So that's, yeah, that's definitely the most challenging.
Okay. And you mentioned that you have illustrators, cartographers, what are skills are make up your team?
So all the different skills all the way through. So, I mean, the thing is, a lot of what we do, we kind of teach here. So even the cartography, I know there are many people who learn cartography in university courses and things. We do it our own way. We have our own way of doing things. So we tend to teach the cartography team how we do cartography. We teach the woodworkers. You can imagine with the woodworkers, if you can cast your mind back to that photograph of Callum and Dom lowering the globe into the base. So it's a round piece of wood. Now that's sections, 8 or 12 or 16 sections of wood that are glued together, that can't come apart, can't show evidence of how they're held together. So it's a really, even though that they are skilled woodworkers, they have to learn a new way of doing things here. So we're constantly, all the skills we are teaching people, all the painters here, they all, two of our painters teach at the Royal Drawing School, but we still had to teach them how to paint a globe, because it's not, they couldn't just come in and be brilliant at it. They have to learn, and painters will start on, and makers and woodworkers will start on the smallest globes to begin with, and then work their way up to the bigger globes, because more things can go wrong on the bigger sizes.
So when you start creating the map itself, do you print it out and then paint around over it, or do you have the illustrator actually create the artwork?
So the illustrator will illustrate whatever they've been requested to illustrate, and then which is done by hand. Then it'll be digitalized, and then once all the images are done, that's then given to the cartographer, who then places them elegantly on where it needs to go. And occasionally it will be on land, so you will have to remove some cities or change the way the cities are depicted in order to get the illustration on there. It's very there are kind of rules of cartography, and no doubt we'll get onto political things later on, but there are rules on cartography, but there's no overall world governing body of cartography saying this is how you do it. So we do it the way we want to do it.
Which is interesting, because my next question was really, are all of your globes geographically accurate to the moment?
Well, see, this is the point. I'll fire that back at you. According to whom?
Right.
Because even America and the UK probably have a different view of how what countries there are in the world. But certainly, if you are Sepp Blatter or anyone in FIFA, the football organization, there's about 220 countries in the world. So everyone has a different view. The UN doesn't recognize Taiwan. So yes, we have a very up-to-date, and we're constantly updating our map, and it includes every country as the folk of that country would like to be recognized.
That makes a lot of sense. Joyce asks, did you appear in a public television special about craftspersons in the UK?
Probably. Do you know what it was called?
I do not. So I'll ask Kathy to put that in the chat or something. I'll keep
we do. I mean, we're definitely the only Globemaker bespoke globe maker in the world. So I kind of, if it's very much about the craft of globe making, and there is a team of people being filmed or shown, then it's probably us.
So Kathy asked a question that you and I were talking about before we got started. Did you start your globe making quest by seeking resources at your local library, museum, Google? I mean, what was your research like?
All of the above. Everything. I tried to find, obviously just going online was the easiest thing to do to begin with, and then trying to find books about it. But there aren't any books. I think my book is probably the most detailed book that's been written about globes, or about how to make them, but it's still very difficult even with that book. So yeah, I was searching around for any resource, but there just weren't any. I kept hearing at the beginning as well that there was special paper for globe making, which, if you think about it, is an absolute joke, because we use, I think, 22 rolls of paper a year. It's nothing. It's no one's going to make paper for someone who uses that small amount of paper. So yeah, I searched around for any clues I could get, but I ended up just trial and error.
Well, you got to it, so that's the important thing. I do want to say before I move on that those images that I showed you, the photographer was you and Miles. Am I saying that correctly?
Yep. Thank you for saying that. Yep.
And did he also contribute to the book? Because I know that it's fully illustrated.
Yeah, he did. There are quite a few of his photographs in the book. He was brilliant. His lives up in, it's either Edinburgh or Glasgow. I'm pretty sure it's Edinburgh, and he gets a 4 a.m. train or something to get down here when he comes and shoots here, and then goes back at the end of the evening. So he's wonderful.
Well, I've really enjoyed seeing his imagery. Are your globes tend to be perfectly round if they're asked to be round, or do they actually mimic the Earth's shape?
So the Earth, as I'm sure many people know, is an oblate spheroid, so it's slightly squished between the poles compared to the equator because of the way it spins and the forces enacted on it. No, that would just be a horrible minefield of because it's barely noticeable. So when I write about this in the book, when you shrink the Earth down to the size of a snooker ball, it's smoother than a snooker ball. But if you rolled it on a snooker table, it would not roll straight, because there is a slight because of the difference, because it's not round. So no, I thought about that for about 5 minutes, and then decided, no, I'm not going to make every globe slightly oblate.
That's probably a good idea. Can you show us any globes? Are there any behind you that you yourself have made, or do you even make full globes anymore?
I don't really. I could show. I'll walk up to this one. So this is the egg globe that I mentioned. I started to help make yesterday. So this is for a charity for to celebrate Easter. It's going to be an egg hunt around London. There was one in 2012 and then one in New York in 2014. So that's one that I did. What did I do? I did that one, and that one. And then the maker who does it all the time came in and started to do the rest. But and this horror here. Can you see that one there?
Oh, what's wrong with that one?
I mean, I did everything on that. I did the painting with a sponge, and it's you can't really see. It's kind of a lime green color. But no, in terms of all the beautiful ones around here, they're all done by my team. There's about 30 of us. This is quite an interesting one. This is an Islamic globe.
Oh, beautiful.
An Islamic map from the medieval times.
I kind of like that green one, Peter, so I think you're all right.
Thank you.
So if somebody wants to buy one of your globes, are your customers all over the world? Or are they mostly in the UK?
Yep, they're all over the world. So we just tend to do it all through the website. People tend to get in touch with us, and then we go from there. It's kind of I mean, you can obviously order just on the website, but we obviously engage with people to often before they place the order.
Mhm. And Scott asks, what are the top 5 types of globes you create? Political, oceanic, animals, historic?
I mean, they're all political. We do the egg globe I showed you is painted in a more geographical sense, but it's still a political map. But we also do the moon, we do Mars, we do a celestial globe. So we do other variants, but we are mapping, obviously the bigger a globe becomes, the more detailed the mapping is, but essentially it's the same political map, just with more detail on as you get larger.
Mhm. Diane says she's going to be on vacation in London in a couple of months. And is your workshop open to the public?
It's not open to the public in a kind of sense that people can just come in and wander around and have a tour, because obviously we're like every normal company. We have work to do and we have deadlines to meet. Obviously, when customers want to come here and commission a globe, then we are here, and we have people coming in here from all over the world. But we try and do kind of meets a couple of times a year so that people can come in groups, because I know that people love coming in here, but it's very difficult unless people are commissioning globes to just be open per se to come into the studio, because it's too disruptive. In my first shop, in my first studio, which, as I said, was this little shop on a back street, I would have the front door open, and people would come in all the time. And I think I was averaging like 4 hours work a day at one point. It's just people just coming in and wanting to talk, and it's great. And I want people to see it and be entertained by the studio, because the studio is stunningly beautiful here. But it's obviously difficult to make everything work.
DJ has a question that I also have. Was there anything special about the globe that you made for your dad? I know you said it cost quite a bit, but like you said you had the animal one and things like that. Was there anything in particular that you made specifically to him?
Not really. I suppose I made most of it. I was involved in I didn't make all of it, like the wooden base. I did sort of the kind of the donkey work, so the sanding and maybe the gluing up, but I didn't do the actual intricate carpentry. But I did painting. It's way uglier than that one. I did the painting, I did all the making, I made the globe, I finished the meridian. The meridian obviously is cast, so I wasn't involved in that element, but I did the finishing of the meridian. So I kind of, his is probably one of a handful where I've done most of the work on.
Wow. And would you say your customers are mostly individuals? Are they collectors, museums, companies, all of the above?
Yeah, all of the above. We don't actually sell to that many companies, but we sell to mainly individuals, to be honest. It's people often think that the large globes will all be commissioned by companies, but they're not. I mean, we do have them in sort of developments. People buy them to put in lobbies in new office buildings, but the majority of our customers are definitely private.
Tyler has a question, which I think is just a hoot. Has anyone commissioned globes of other planets?
Yes, but I mean, as I mentioned, so we do have a moon globe and we do have a Mars globe, but beyond that, it's kind of, it's just a blue blob or an orange blob, or they're not, there's nothing on there. Most of them are very gaseous, or they've got a lot of, that you can't get the detail of the surface. So we kind of do the ones that that there is some sort of detail and there is something we can put on there as mapping. But we actually get our Mars and Moon from a contact at the European Space Agency, so we have super good detail.
So when I was a kid, we had some globes that actually had texture to them. And so Pam asks, are there any globes that are like not smooth, like have mountains added or things like that?
So going back to that comment I said earlier, if you reduce Earth to the size of a snooker ball, it's smoother than a snooker ball. So putting relief onto a globe, I've never really thought much about that, because it just doesn't seem. Everest on our Churchill globe, which is 150 inches, Everest is I know 0.0001 millimeters high. So it's something like so that the diameter of the Earth is 8,000 miles. The highest point is 5 miles, I think, and the deepest point is 6 miles. So it's minuscule, and so I prefer to not show it. I think that's yeah, I think that's better. But we did do a wonderful one recently for a blind customer where we put Braille onto the outside of the globe. So we actually hand painted the Braille, and we had routes going between different continents. So so they could, it was routes, travel routes that they'd done in their life. So we did that.
That's amazing. Deborah asks, do you know if there's exists any kind of globe museums?
Yes, there are. I should know where they are as well. There's one in Cambridge, I think. There's one in Vienna, I think. I think there's possibly one in Italy and Florence, maybe, or quite a few globes. There's in Italy, there are more globes around, perhaps, than so some museums have multiple globes. The National Maritime Museum over here has 400 globes, but it has 5 or 6 on view, and all the rest are in their vaults. So we're kind of lucky enough we can ask to go and view their vaults, which if you make up a story, you can also try and see them as well. But it's kind of a bit sad. Globes are so expensive to restore that none of them can be restored. So they're all just sitting in cabinets degrading.
Oh,
So
that's sad.
it's really sad. But they're to restore a, I don't know, a 10-inch globe will cost you several £1,000s, and it's worth £200. It's not worth it. So it's very difficult.
Well, and maybe that's part of the reason why it's become a lost art.
Yeah, I think and that's why so many of them have actually been lost over the period. There aren't that many globes around. You can imagine there must have been hundreds of thousands of globes made, certainly when full color printing came in the 19th century. After that time, thousands of globes were made, and they would be beautiful now, but the construction of globes is so difficult. Once they start degrading, there's not much you can do, and eventually they just get thrown away.
John says he's about 2/3 of the way through your book, and he didn't see anything about 3D printing. Do you use 3D printing?
There is potentially a little bit in there. We don't use it for the globes. We created this wonderful base for a customer in Austria that consisted of 3 petals which were cast in bronze. And so that process, we designed the petals, and then we had to have those 3D printed, and it was a petal that was in we had to make 3D print it in 4 sections, and then we had to glue those together and finish them off and then send them to the foundry to be cast. So that's the only so far, but it's not something, obviously what we do is very much about doing things by hand, and 3D printing it's useful for that element, but for the actual globe side of things, it would kind of we'd be cheating ourselves in a way.
So follow-up question to that, which is my own, is do you use any sort of AI in the manufacturing of your images?
No. I don't see how, and I'm trying to think why we would, but no, we don't.
Okay.
I can't. Yeah.
Just a curiosity of the times.
Yeah.
Roger says, how do you manage to glue the gore to a curved surface without the edges becoming creased?
You have to stretch it through the middle. So it's going on. So you can imagine if you just lay it flat onto a globe. Can you see this behind me?
Yes.
So obviously that's it's flat, and you can see the shadows. It doesn't want to go down. So and even doing that, you can still see the shadows. But then you wet this piece of paper and you stretch it on another globe before you put it onto the finished one, and it will stretch through the center. But it's not that easy.
I can't imagine it would be. Let's see. What is the source for the cartography on your globes? I know you have people on staff, and how do you transfer transfer it from paper to a computer file to a sphere?
So the source was I bought the original mapping to begin with, but we've stripped it back, and we barely use much of the original mapping that I got. And so what we're doing is a printed globe. So when we have the digital files, and then we will print that onto paper, and then obviously by sticking that to the sphere, that's how the artwork or the cartography then appears on the sphere.
I have a couple questions about themes. David asks, have you done any about climate change, anything with climate change themes?
Yes. Is there one around? For an artist, you can look him up, called Yinka Shonibari. We do a lot of climate change globes for him. He actually uses them in his artwork, often as heads that go on mannequins, and they have temperatures of the earth, and we have to update that every year because it's sadly the red spots are getting bigger and the blue spots are getting smaller.
Wow, it's amazing to me that your art is being used for other artworks.
Yeah, we actually get asked quite a lot, and we're very, very particular. It's amazing. Yinka, you should read his story. He's incredible. He is about 2 miles away from us here, and his head of studio walked past my previous shop one day, and kind of came in and said, we've been looking for a globe manufacturer, and there's one on our doorstep. And so yeah, so we do 20, 30, 40 a year for him. He's incredible.
Diane asks, what's the biggest globe you've made?
So the biggest, not only the biggest globe we've made, probably the biggest printed globe ever made is 50 centimeters. So 2 were made for Churchill and Roosevelt in the war, and a few more which were 50 inches today. And we are replicating that size. There are bigger globes, just in the way that books used to be manuscript books. They would all be handwritten. The first large globes would be manuscript globes, So that would just be someone pasting blank paper onto a sphere and then just writing all the detail in. So there are 2 in Venice that are bigger than that, but it's obviously a much easier thing to achieve, a manuscript globe, but it obviously takes a lot longer and it's a lot less accurate.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a favorite globe that you've made?
I think really when you hear the stories that some of our customers have, that makes the globes really special, and those are constantly amazing stories about how families have kind of migrated across the world, and there are just so many stories like that that are just incredible. I don't really, in a sense, have a particular favorite. I do I kind of love the Churchill when we do, so the Churchill can either be made 2 ways. One where it sits on bearing, so that base we saw earlier that you saw B was sanding, that when it sits on the floor will have 5 bearings that the globe sits on, and then you can spin the globe in any direction. We also make that globe with a meridian around, just like the other one in the example that the 2 guys were lowering down. And that one, when it's shipped, goes in a crate that is 2 meters cubed.
Ooh.
Can only go on A380s, can't go on 747s.
Oh.
And it's enormous. And when you spin it, it will spin for 2 minutes. So I kind of really like that, but that's just kind of saying I like the biggest one. So it's a name.
Well, I would imagine there's a bit more challenge to the bigger ones too, and making them and getting them right and shipping them.
Yeah, there's a lot of challenges in there, particularly with the construction of it, because you've got to have everything super strong. We have to over engineer everything to do with the Churchill globe. Like everything is massively stronger than it needs to be.
Mm-hmm. I wish I could afford one. I saw your company, Ann Miller says, I saw your company on CBS's Sunday Morning, which is a show I watch. I didn't catch that. Did that appearance help your company grow in the US, or the knowledge of it grow in the US?
We were already quite big in the US, but that was incredible.
Yeah.
And they repeated it as well. In fact, I'm over in New York in May and being interviewed by Martha Teichner I'm doing some talks. But yeah, it's incredible. And I saw them a while back, and they said companies often after their appearance on CBS Sunday Morning, their websites crash. They can't fulfill so many orders because they're swamped with orders. And we went from, I think, a 4 to 5 month average waiting time to 18 months, which is embarrassing. It was ridiculous. We just couldn't keep up with it. I mean, for anyone ringing up and saying, I'd like a globe, 18 months, it's like ridiculous.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, especially if it's a climate change one, everything will be different. Okay, last question. Dory says that your book is beautiful, which everybody has been saying. Did you design it? What made you decide to write a book and have it illustrated the way that you did?
So I've always kind of wanted to have something to go with our large globes. I've always felt that giving a little brochure out was a bit lame, and I actually said to people at the beginning, who I'm now sending books out to, that I will eventually write something that might be a book or something that is worthwhile to give with your globe. And then, quite by chance, an agent approached me a couple of years ago and said, I've been following you. I love what you do. I think you should write a book. And I said, I definitely think I should write a book. And so we went on that whole journey, and it's been incredibly interesting and fun doing. And I involved the whole team here helping me. I had illustrators doing illustrations specifically for the book. We had a few more photo shoots arranged. We obviously involved all the painters painting the illustrations. And then Jade, who, if you've occasionally heard a voice this evening, is sitting behind me, is about 99% responsible for all the amazing imagery on there, and deciding which images that we should use in the book. And then we had a wonderful guy do the layout as well. So it was that, I think, when we delivered the manuscript to the publisher, they thought we'd done our job, and they would go away and send back in a few weeks the finished construction. And we were like, not a chance. This is the most important thing about this is representing our company. We are fully invested in how this book is going to look. We did actually have quite a big fight about the cover. They actually won that fight, but 99% of things on the inside we won. And I actually have 50 unbound books downstairs that we are going to set up a little bookbinding operation here and add more to them to make some special editions, which I'm really looking forward to.
Well, I will look forward to those too, because I think that will be amazing. I mean, the book itself is amazing. And then on top of that, to add, make it more personalized or whatever, would be just beyond. So Peter, thank you so much for this hour of pure delight for me. It's been fascinating. I feel like I've learned a lot.
Thank you. That's gone incredibly quickly.
It has, actually. We still have like 50 more questions. So we might have to do a part 2 sometime when you have a little free time. But thank you again for your time and your expertise. And we will all be looking for your globes, because even if we have to wait 18 months, it looks like it's absolutely worth the wait. Your team is fantastic, and you're such a good leader of them to create this thing that we really love so much.
Yeah, I am. I haven't really said enough about the team. My team are amazing. I'm very lucky that I've got such a talented team of people who are so invested in what we do. Everyone QCs everyone's work all the time, and they're constantly talking about things, and they don't want anything to leave this studio that is not perfect. And it's really amazing to have a team like that. But thank you very much for having me, and I hope it's been interesting.
There's no question that it's been interesting. I don't know if you can see the chat, but people are just thanking you and congratulating you, and really talking about how beautiful your book is and the work that you do. So again, thank you. Thank you everybody who came and stayed with us and asked lots of questions. And I hope that you get to check out Peter's site, and order some globes, because we can never have enough. It's a thing, like it makes me happy. So I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone.
Goodbye.